"Don't touch that!" one of the engineers shouted, his voice cracking under the pressure. Sparks flew from the massive server rack. Alarms blared across the production floor, and red lights washed the multi-million-dollar facility in a frantic glow. Everyone froze except the janitor. With a mop still in one hand and his chest pounding, he took one desperate step forward. "Before we dive in, drop a comment with where you're watching from. And don't forget to hit subscribe for more videos like this." Let's begin. The scene was chaos. Thick smoke curled from the server room like black snakes, filling the air with the smell of burning circuits. Executives stood frozen behind the glass wall, their faces pale, eyes locked on the numbers flashing. Across the emergency screens, "System failure," 97% blinked in crimson letters. Millions of dollars in contracts that kept thousands of workers employed were seconds from disintegrating. Engineers screamed at one another, typing furiously, cables whipping across the floor. Yet nothing worked. And in the middle of it all, Ethan Riley, the janitor, clutched his mop tighter. He wasn't supposed to be here. He wasn't supposed to even look at the system. But when one of the smaller servers near the wall collapsed into flames, instinct took over. He rushed forward, stomping it out with his boot, his shirt catching sparks. "Get back!" An engineer barked, sweat dripping down his face. "You'll ruin everything." Ethan's voice was low, but steady. "It's already ruined if you don't let me help." Heads whipped toward him. A janitor, covered in grease and sweat, daring to speak in the middle of a multi-billion-dollar crisis. The room went dead silent except for the alarms. One executive sneered, "You? What could you possibly know? Do you even understand what's happening here?" Ethan didn't answer right away. Instead, he glanced toward a trembling young intern, barely 21, who had collapsed against the wall, clutching her arm from smoke inhalation. He knelt, offering his only clean rag to cover her mouth and nose. "Breathe through this. You'll be fine," he whispered, his voice kind despite the chaos. The kindness went unnoticed by most, but not by her. The girl's wide eyes locked onto him with gratitude as she gasped for air. Then Ethan turned back toward the main panel, his jaw clenched. He knew this system, not because of the job, but because years ago, before life ripped everything from him, he had once been a promising engineer himself. But when his wife died in a hospital that cut corners to save costs, he walked away from the world of business and numbers. He became invisible, a janitor, a ghost in plain sight. Until now. "Step away from the panel." Another engineer barked, but his hands were trembling too much to even type. Ethan stepped closer. The truth was brutal. One wrong move could wipe out $300 million in contracts. The company would fall. Families depending on these jobs would be crushed. And the suits behind the glass wall, they only cared about their stock price. But Ethan? He thought about the workers he greeted every morning, the cafeteria lady who slipped him free coffee, the security guard who talked to him about his daughter's tuition. If there was a way to save it, he couldn't stand by. Ethan placed his hand on the override switch. Gasps filled the room. "Don't you dare!" an executive hissed, pounding the glass. "If you touch that, you'll destroy us all." Ethan's eyes narrowed. He didn't do this for them. He did it for the people who would lose everything. His voice cut through the smoke like steel. Sometimes the ones at the bottom see what the top refuses to. And with one decisive move, he flipped the switch. The alarms roared louder, then silenced. Every light in the room went black. **4. 5 heart-stopping seconds. The factory floor plunged into pitch darkness. The only sound was the ragged breathing of terrified engineers and the distant hum of cooling fans spinning down. People clutched their chests, frozen in the silence. Then, like a slow sunrise, the panels lit up again. Not red this time, Green dot system reboot successful blinked across the main display. Not a wave of gasps swept the room. Screens that seconds ago flashed doom now showed recovery. The production line whirred back to life, conveyor belts sputtering, robotic arms jerking into motion. Millions in contracts had been dangling over a cliff, and a janitor's single act had pulled them back. But instead of gratitude, anger erupted. "What the hell do you think you were doing?" One of the senior engineers, a tall man named Robert Kane, stormed toward him, his face purple with fury. "You could have destroyed the entire operation. You're a janitor, Ethan, a janitor." Ethan didn't flinch. He glanced at the young intern he'd helped minutes earlier. She still clutched his rag against her mouth, her wide eyes fixed on him like he'd just turned into something otherworldly. "That was enough. I didn't destroy it," Ethan said flatly, voice calm. "I saved it." His words sliced through the noise like a blade, but the executives watching from behind the glass weren't impressed. The head of operations, Harvey Lancaster, shoved the door open and stormed in, his Rolex glinting in the green glow. "You just cost us liability insurance coverage. Do you realize what happens when an unqualified staff member tampers with a live system? You've jeopardized us all." "Jeopardized?" Ethan's eyes narrowed. "You were seconds away from total collapse. Your engineers couldn't stop it." "I did," Lancaster sneered, lips curling. "Don't lecture me, Riley. You clean floors, you mop up spills. That's your role. Stay in it." Something hot burned in Ethan's chest, but he didn't lash out. "Not yet," he simply muttered. "Maybe if you listened to people outside your circle once in a while, you wouldn't be standing here praying over contracts." The engineers shifted uncomfortably. Some glanced at Ethan with quiet respect, others with resentment, but none dared speak. Then, a soft voice broke the tension. "Mr. Riley." The young intern stepped forward, pulling the rag from her mouth. Her face was streaked with soot, her blonde hair plastered to her forehead. "He saved us." The panel was locked in a loop, that override. "It's the only thing that could have broken it. I studied the schematics and orientation. I know he's right." The entire room turned toward her. She was just an intern, barely out of college, but her words cracked the armor of authority in the room. Lancaster's jaw tightened. He couldn't scream at her the way he could at a janitor. Not without looking like a tyrant. Ethan bent slightly toward her, his voice low so only she could hear. "Thank you. What's your name?" "Clare." "Clare Donovan," she whispered, her lips trembling. He gave her the faintest smile. "You've got courage, Clare. Don't lose it." But Lancaster was already snapping his fingers at security. "Escort him out. Immediately. I want him off company property before I have a lawsuit on my desk." Two guards stepped forward. One of them, Mike Jordan, hesitated. Mike was a middle-aged father of three, a man Ethan had shared countless morning coffee chats with in the break room. He knew Ethan wasn't reckless. He knew he cared. "Sir," Mike said carefully, "maybe we should, now." Lancaster barked, cutting him off. Reluctantly, Mike placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. Not aggressively, almost apologetically. "Sorry, buddy. Orders." Ethan didn't resist. He let himself be walked toward the exit, his jaw locked, his eyes scanning the chaos he had just prevented. Engineers were already back at their stations, rebooting systems, checking lines, pretending like their work had saved the day. The executives puffed their chests, preparing their press statements. And him, the man who had risked everything, were throwing out like trash. But before he reached the doors, Claire's voice rang out again, louder this time. "This isn't right. He saved $300 million worth of contracts. He saved all of us, and you're firing him?" Lancaster whirled on her, eyes blazing. "Careful, Miss Donovan. You're an intern. Interns are replaceable." The words hung heavy in the air. A few engineers looked away, shame flickering in their eyes. But Ethan turned to Claire, offering a small nod, silently telling her, "Don't fight for me." Not yet. He let Mike lead him out. Outside in the cool evening air, Ethan sat on the curb, his mop leaning against his shoulder. The plant hummed behind him, alive again because of his gamble. Yet all he felt was hollow. Mike came out a few minutes later, standing awkwardly. "Man, I'm sorry. You know I didn't want to." Ethan cut him off gently. "Don't worry about it. You've got kids. You need this job." Mike's throat bobbed. He looked down, guilt written across his face. "I'll buy you a drink." "Sometime, least I can do." Ethan managed a faint smile. "I'll hold you to that." As Mike went back inside, Ethan's smile faded. His hands trembled as he pulled out an old, folded photo from his pocket, his wife, Anna, and their little daughter, back when life still had meaning. He whispered under his breath, "I tried, Anna. I still try." A noise pulled him from his thoughts. Claire had slipped outside, rushing to his side. "You can't just leave it like this," she said breathlessly. "They'll bury what you did. They'll spin the story, take the credit, and you'll be forgotten." Ethan's lips curved into a bitter smirk. "That's been my life for a long time, Claire." "No," she said firmly, shaking her head. "Not this time. I saw it. You didn't just save contracts. You saved jobs, families, lives, people like me. My dad got laid off last year when his company folded. If this place collapsed today, hundreds of families would be wrecked the same way. You can't let them erase what you did." Her words stirred something in him. Something he thought he'd buried under years of mopping floors and living in silence. Years he'd avoided conflict. After losing his wife, after watching corporate greed take her life because a hospital cut costs on equipment, he'd withdrawn. Let the world walk over him. But tonight had reignited a fire. He realized something chilling. This wasn't over. They had humiliated him, cast him out like a disposable rag. But deep down, Ethan knew he held something they didn't: truth. And truth, when revealed at the right time, could burn more fiercely than fire. "Claire," he said slowly, his voice steady again. "You're right. They think I'll disappear. But I won't. Not this time." Her eyes widened. "What are you going to do?" He looked back at the glowing factory behind them, his reflection shimmering in the glass. For the first time in years, he felt alive. "Make them remember who I am," Ethan whispered. And in the silence that followed, the seeds of his revenge began to grow. 2 days later, the company boardroom buzzed with tension. The executives sat stiffly in their chairs, ties tight, voices sharp. On the giant screen, a reporter's face filled the frame. Breaking news: a near catastrophe at Halcyon Systems almost cost the company $300 million in contracts. Inside sources claim the disaster was averted not by senior engineers, but by a janitor. Gasps echoed through the boardroom. Harvey Lancaster's face drained of color. "Who leaked this?" He growled. No one spoke. The reporter continued, her tone sharp as a blade. "Witnesses allege that instead of rewarding him, Halcyon executives fired the janitor, Ethan Riley, moments after he saved the entire production line. Workers now rally behind him, demanding answers." The screen cut to footage of employees chanting outside the factory gates, holding up hand-drawn signs. "Ethan saved us, and respect workers, not just suits." Lancaster slammed his fist on the table. "Find out who's responsible for this smear campaign now." But deep down he knew. He knew exactly who wouldn't stay silent. Across town, Ethan sat in a modest diner, the glow of neon lights flickering against the window. Across from him sat Claire Donovan, her laptop open, articles already spreading across local and national outlets. "You leaked it," Ethan said, not angry, just matter of fact. Claire's eyes didn't waver. "No, we leaked it. You deserve credit. And people deserve to know the truth." Ethan leaned back, rubbing his hands over his face. "Claire, they'll come after me harder than you can imagine." She tilted her chin. "Then let them. You've been silent long enough." Her conviction was contagious. For the first time in years, Ethan allowed himself to imagine something more than just mopping floors. A chance at dignity. A chance at justice. By morning, Ethan Riley's name was everywhere. News anchors replayed shaky phone footage of the server room smoke, alarms, and Ethan flipping the override switch while executives screamed at him to stop. Workers from the factory gave interviews calling him a hero. Even rival companies weighed in, some openly mocking Halcyon for firing the man who saved them, and yet, through the storm, Ethan stayed quiet. Not because he was afraid, but because he was waiting. When the phone call finally came, he was ready. "Mr. Riley," the voice said stiffly. It was Margaret Dean, the chairwoman of Halcyon's board. "We'd like to speak with you, urgently." "Today," Ethan almost smiled. "Of course I'll be there." The boardroom was silent when he entered. Every executive sat with fake smiles plastered on their faces, as if pretending they hadn't thrown him out like trash days earlier. Clare walked beside him, holding a folder of documents. Lancaster's jaw clenched. "Riley, you've caused quite the stir. But let's be clear, you endangered our systems and your recklessness." "Enough," Chairwoman Dean interrupted, her tone sharp. She turned to Ethan. "Tell us exactly what happened that night." Ethan's eyes scanned the room. Suits. Expensive watches. Men and women who lived in glass towers, so far removed from the people whose sweat built their empire. He drew a slow breath. "What happened," he began, voice steady, "wasn't an accident. That system was failing because of negligence. You ignored the warnings, slashed maintenance budgets, and silenced workers who spoke up. You gambled with people's livelihoods. And when disaster struck, you froze." Lancaster scoffed. "And you what? You think you're some kind of savior?" "No," Ethan said quietly. "I'm not a savior. I'm a man who couldn't watch. You destroy thousands of lives for the sake of your pride." He turned to Clare, who handed him the folder. He slid it across the table. Inside were printouts of maintenance reports, whistleblower complaints, and internal memos evidence Clare had dug up during long nights while executives slept in their mansions. Chairwoman Dean flipped through the pages, her face growing darker. With every line, "This," Ethan said, his voice low but firm, "is proof. Proof that your so-called leadership nearly cost this company everything. I didn't just save contracts. I saved people. And you fired me for it." The room erupted in murmurs. Some executives looked down, ashamed. Others exchanged panicked glances. Lancaster's voice cracked with desperation. "You don't understand the complexities." Ethan cut him off, his voice thundering now. "The only complexity here is greed. You've forgotten the people who keep this company alive, the janitors, the line workers, the cafeteria staff, the ones you never see. Without them, without us, you're nothing." The silence that followed was suffocating. Finally, Chairwoman Dean spoke. "Mr. Riley, on behalf of the board, I apologize. What was done to you was unacceptable." She closed the folder slowly, her gaze locking onto Lancaster. "Effective immediately, Mr. Lancaster, you're relieved of your position." Lancaster shot up, his face twisted with rage. "You can't do this." But security was already at his side. This time, no one hesitated to escort him out. As the doors shut behind him, Chairwoman Dean turned back to Ethan. "You've proven not only courage, but leadership. I'd like to offer you a role head of safety and operations, with full authority to protect this company's future." Gasps rippled through the room. A janitor promoted to leadership? Ethan stood still, his hands pressed against the table. Part of him wanted to laugh at the absurdity. But then he thought of Anna, of the night she died because no one had listened. When cheaper equipment was installed, he thought of Claire's trembling voice, fighting for him when no one else would. He thought of Mike, the guard, trying to help in his quiet way. He nodded slowly. "I'll accept, but only on one condition." "And that is?" Dean asked. "That you start listening to the people at the bottom. Because they're the ones who see what you refuse to." For the first time, the boardroom erupted not in anger, but in applause. That evening, as the sun bled orange across the sky, Ethan walked out of the building not as a janitor, but as a man reborn. Workers gathered outside, cheering his name, clapping him on the back. Mike pushed through the crowd, grinning wide. "Told you I owed you a drink. Guess I'll make it two now." Ethan laughed, the sound raw but real. And for the first time in years, the weight on his chest lifted. Beside him, Claire smiled, her voice soft. "You did it. You made them remember." Ethan gazed at the horizon, his heart full but steady. "No, Claire, we did it." And as the factory roared with life behind them, Ethan Riley, the janitor who refused to stay invisible, finally walked into his future with dignity, justice, and a fire that no one could extinguish again.